So welcome. Thank you very much for being here and for giving us your time. You have been through the edTPA process now from beginning to end, and we want to spend some time getting your words of wisdom as another group gets ready to go through it. Before we begin, Holly, if you could start and just introduce yourself and tell us where you did your student teaching and at what grade level.
Okay, hi, I'm Holly Walsh, and I did my student teaching at Glen C. Marlowe Elementary in kindergarten.
My name is Alex Ownbey. I did my student teaching at Glen Marlowe with Holly, and I also had kindergarten.
Hi, I'm Marianna, and I did my student teaching at Avery's Creek, and I was in 2nd grade.
Hi, I'm Amelia Rubin, and I did my student teaching at Avery's Creek also in 4th grade.
I'm Charlie Bridger. I was also at Avery's Creek in 4th grade.
Thank you. So our conversation this afternoon is about edTPA. About a year ago, you all heard the term edTPA for the very first time. Now you have completed the process and actually submitted your portfolios to Pearson. So having been through the process, how would you describe both the edTPA process and product to candidates who are just beginning the journey?
Okay, I'll start and then they can correct me. I would say the process, it does revolve around the product, so I guess I'll actually start with the product. The product that we ended up turning in is a portfolio basically proving that we know how to plan lessons, teach those lessons, and then reflect on our planning and our teaching of those lessons, so that the reflection being a tool to help you think about what all goes into planning and teaching a lesson. So we actually planned in great detail a unit of 3 lessons. We taught those lessons while filming ourselves, and then reflected on both the planning process and the teaching process, talking about, why exactly what we were doing was the right thing to do based on what we knew, what we learned from our education classes, based on research, so on and so forth. And then after we actually taught, explaining how the parts of our lesson plans came together in the product, the finished product of the actual teaching of the class.
There's a heavy emphasis in edTPA also on assessment, which is, for me, something that hadn't always been a focus when I was preparing to teach. There's a lot of emphasis on classroom management, knowing the content, but not so much on assessment. So I think that the biggest thing that I took from edTPA is the importance of assessment, and it helps you, it's kind of a begin with the end in mind situation. So it helps you focus in that way. Not only how do my lesson plans fit together, how do they fulfill my standards, also how do I meet the needs of my actual class, but you're also thinking like, how am I gonna gauge all of that? How am I gonna focus my teaching in a way that produces measurable outcomes, which I think is really useful.
edTPA also wants you to utilize their community assets. So in some of the commentary, you're specifically asked, how do you use the culture of your school to benefit towards your teaching, which is something that I didn't often think of beforehand. Like, how could I help these students in a rural area learn in a different way or learn about something, because each school has a different climate and a different culture, and playing into their needs is really important also. So edTPA really wants you to focus on the whole student, like how you can teach the whole student and how you can focus on each student's needs in order to meet your goal, your final product.
The whole thing is set up in 4 parts. And so the first part, like Charlie was saying, is the planning. You do 3 lesson plans and then a commentary on basically why you chose to put what you did in the lesson plans, why this particular lesson is good for this particular group of students. And then the second part is the actual videos of you teaching. It's like 20 minutes of any of the 3 lesson plans. And then you have another commentary on that, which talks about like what happened, what you could have done better, things like that. The third part is the assessment component, where you take the assessment that you gave the kids as part of your lesson and then, again, a commentary on it. You explain why it worked, what you could have done differently, things like that. And then the fourth part is math. So it's going back in and reteaching something that some students missed, and the understandings that you teach the lesson and have the lesson plans and everything. And then again, a commentary on that.
To me, a big part of edTPA, I think, is learning how to reach different students in the class. Like how do I teach my low kids? How do I teach my kids who understand more than other kids in the classroom? So the whole process for me was my biggest challenge was to teach all the kids in the class, and for them not, to challenge every kid and not just this is how I'm going to teach and everyone in the class is going to get everything the same kind of thing.
So what was the most challenging part of edTPA for all of you?
For myself, the most challenging part was just arguing the reasons why I chose to teach the way I chose, like for my lesson plans. Why did I choose to play this game? What's my research behind playing this game? Why did I choose to do this? And because for everything that you put into your lesson plan, it needs to be research-based. You need to have good reasons why you're doing it, and you have to be able to argue that and persuade whoever is reading it that I know what I'm doing, that I can teach a good lesson. So for me, that was the hardest part, was making sure that I had a really good reason why I was teaching what I was teaching.
Honestly, for me, it's a lot of work. I mean, like Alex was saying, they want you to be very in-depth, explain why, but there's a commentary for everything. There's reflection for everything. You need to compile everything. The videos, you have to go through and watch yourself, like every second of yourself teaching these 3 lessons, which I was like, I can't believe my voice sounds like that. That was kind of difficult. Why am I making that face right now? Kind of deal. But yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of analysis and reflecting, and that's really hard.
I would say one of the things that I would suggest someone pay attention to in the first part of the edTPA process, when you have the chance to go through the process before you're actually submitting it, is, like a lot of people said earlier, there's a large emphasis on your school, your classroom, and then even smaller than that, the individuals in the classroom, and how are you meeting each individual's needs, especially students with IEPs or struggling readers, or students that don't fit into like the cookie cutter mold of the classroom. And so I think that the first time I went through it, it was very difficult to think about the individual needs of students because I didn't have as much experience with the classroom, and maybe I wasn't paying as close attention to those specific things as I should have. But then the second time, after I kind of focused in and paid attention to those things, tried to pay attention to how the school day as a whole flowed, how the school put emphasis on specific classroom management strategies and development, how they wanted their students to be developed, and then the individual needs of students in the classroom. Paying attention to those things at all times, not just when you're directly teaching, I think is really important. And it's one of the more difficult things for me is to take note of what's going on even when you're not teaching directly.
For me, I think it's managing your time because it's a lot of work. There's a lot of little baby steps that kind of go in the process that are kind of like there, and you don't really know it until you start doing it. That you're like, oh, this is supposed to be this format, or this I need this and this kind of thing to complete this, step B, or things like that, and just kind of sitting down and really like putting your time into it. It's a lot of work.
And doing the baby steps.
Yeah.
Let them be baby steps.
Yeah.
Don't wait
Yeah.
until all the baby steps are supposed to be done and then do it as one big giant step, because that doesn't work.
It's really, yeah.
Yeah, it has to be a priority to get all
Yeah.
the puzzle pieces
Yep.
in place.
But I also would not approach it as task 1, task 2, task
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
it's
all-
well, like with teaching, as you'll find out, it's not a linear thing at all. Which also, I guess, is kind of the beauty of it. Is how, yes, all the pieces fit together, but they're actually not all separate pieces. It's a thing.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time, we would finish task 1, but then in task 2, we would go back and be like, oh, well, that, that makes more sense with task 1, and then we'd be in task 3, and then, it's a lot of reintegration, which is a lot of what teaching is, like Amelia
Yeah,
said
and
anyway.
assessment doesn't just
Yeah.
happen at the end, it
Yeah.
happens throughout, in the beginning, and all the pieces that they ask you to reflect on, you're doing it all at once.
Yeah.
So I'd like for you to think back now that you have been through the process to the semester that comes before your clinical practice when you learn to do edTPA. Knowing what you know now, what sorts of things would you have done in a different way or done more of or asked questions about that you didn't know to do that way the first semester?
I think for me, understanding the edTPA language, there's a lot of very specific language used in edTPA that I had never heard of before, and I think, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think it took us all a little while for it to click. Because we would do practice lesson plans and we would still not understand what's a language function, what's all this stuff, what does this mean, and it took us some time for it all to click, but once it finally clicked, we got it. And I think maybe if I would have taken more time to focus on that language, it would have clicked faster.
I was gonna say just take it more seriously in general, because there was a lot going on that semester, so it wasn't my only priority. So I don't think I used it to prepare myself in the best way I could have, because the more work you put in during that semester, the easier it will be as your student teaching and lesson planning and taking over this classroom.
Yeah, I could definitely retweet the ones that the sections that I found easiest to do when I was actually doing it were the sections that I had spent the most time on when we did it the first time. It's pretty clear to see when you start working on the real edTPA what part you actually have and what part you didn't spend enough time on. So if you can spend that amount of time and effort, a good amount of time and effort on all of the little parts, it'll help a lot in the long run.
I wish that in my practice semester, my practice time with edTPA, I would have explored different standards to my grade, different lessons and stuff to kind of see how it would fit more into the edTPA format. So it's literacy is the first big chunk, but literacy is such a huge concept. So there's so many things fall under that. But I feel, after my experience, there are different concepts, different standards that are more suited for the edTPA format. with its reflection and its demand of student work and everything like that.
Reading, writing, integration.
Yes, a lot of that. And so I wish what I would have done is spoken to my professors more, spoken to my supporting teacher a lot more about, what my students need to see in this time frame, what they need to do, how my teacher envisioned lessons being taught, and while also having a deeper understanding of the edTPA format to kind of have a conversation about how we can integrate student needs, standards with the edTPA format in a more harmonious way. Because sometimes I found myself struggling trying to fit like this square peg into a circle hole with this edTPA format. So I think I would have reflected more and kind of immersed myself more in the edTPA format, because I feel like the content and teaching standards, we have got a lot of that through the UNCA program as a whole. So making those mesh with the edTPA format more be what I would work on.
During my practice, I think, I wished I spent more time with my kids, just knowing where they are and their level of understanding. Also, kind of like when you're doing your practice to like fully do it and not like miss the baby steps or the small parts of the lesson plan or things like that. Because later on, when you're doing the real thing, you would want to go back and look at the practice and just kind of see like, oh, what did I say? Because on the practice, you will have some feedback that you could be like, okay, I should have improved this section, and so how can I do my real edTPA the way it's supposed to be, using your practice as an example almost.
I think I would also use my practice time more to work on consistent classroom management strategies to be highlighted in my videos, like having consistent like checks of assessment throughout, like using a thumbs up with your kids, or like some sort of very consistent thing you can reference when you are talking about how you manage a classroom, because they ask you about that throughout. Classroom management is part of everything, teaching, the assessment, everything.
So you've talked about the challenges. I want to switch gears a little bit and ask you now to talk about what you found the greatest reward to be from completing the process.
I think for me, the greatest reward was just questioning everything you do, because I think like later on when when you're teaching for years, you kind of lose that thing, just kind of like, oh, I do everything that I'm supposed to be, and you get in that flow and you just kind of like, I don't know, maybe you just don't put as much effort. But I feel like when you're doing this at TPA, it makes you question everything you do, like, why am I doing this? Like, and so and it literally makes you reflect on why did you do that? Like, how are you helping your kids by doing this? So I think that the whole edTPA process just helped me think about everything that I'm doing in a class. Like, how am I reaching all of the kids in a class? Like, what am I doing to help them? And like, it teaches you to almost like multitask of like reaching all the kids at once.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It gets you in the habit of constantly thinking about every kid and differentiation, and also how you're assessing them in a way that fits their needs. Like, I think it was Amelia who was saying that we hadn't gotten in the pattern of learning, like thinking about assessment, because we're kind of focused on other things here. But now I'm so much more aware of like, oh, the simple question I'm asking them is telling me so much about how I taught and what they need from me still. And that's something I'm really grateful for.
Yeah, edTPA kind of sent me on this like research wormhole about assessment, because like I felt like it was an area that was really lacking in knowledge, and assessment is such like a great thing because it can be, like Holly said, in the form of a question that elicits these, and you learn so much about your students and where they are from just simple check-ins like throughout. Assessments doesn't have to be a unit exam or a survey or anything like that. It's you paying attention like to your students, and that was my biggest reward, I think, from edTPA. And the reflecting on why.
I feel like through edTPA, Charlie said this at our last meeting, it's like the golden like ticket of lesson plans. Like that is like the perfect lesson plan. And in an ideal world, that would be the way you would plan, but that you don't have that kind of time.
That's so true.
Yeah.
But it makes you think about the necessary things you need to include in your lesson plans when you only have 45 minutes during the day to lesson plan. Or if you have an IEP, if you have an IEP meeting at the end of the day, you don't have time to go back and check your lesson plans to make sure. So just knowing what you need to include in all your lesson plans and having that argument as to why you're doing what you're doing is really important, because I know at Glen Marlowe, our principal would come into our classroom and watch us all the time. And it was really nice for him to like see that clear, like, oh, you're doing this for this reason, and we could talk to him about it, and we could, tell him why we were teaching the way we were teaching. So it kind of covers all your bases, but it makes you really think about how you plan your lessons in a more thorough way.
The lesson plans that you complete in edTPA,
They're monsters.
they're not going to be what you're going to have for every lesson that you teach. So yes, like the golden ticket idea, but it gives you those tools, like Alex was saying, to talk about why you're doing what you're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And it guides you through. So when you have the 15 minutes and then you have your like team planning or whatever, like you're thinking about it in your mind. You have those tools to think about.
Yeah, it's funny. edTPA talks a lot about the tools that you're using and incorporating learning strategies, and it's like jargony vocabulary, but it's so perfect for everything that you're doing as a teacher, because like the ideal, what I think the ideal form of learning is you start with something that is solid, that you can touch, that you can move around, and you have this tool that you're using to learn a strategy, and then you have the strategy and you don't need the tool anymore, and then the tool is in your head, and then you can apply that strategy to future problems that are similar but a little different to what you learned before, right? And so if we're talking about our learning, that's kind of what edTPA was for us. We have this tool in front of us that asks us all these questions, and we have to be able to answer all these questions. And no, I'm not going to sit down and ask myself all these questions before I teach every lesson, but it does become kind of automated, like they've said. It becomes kind of an automatic response. Why am I doing this? What am I doing? What tool am I teaching? What strategy am I teaching? What are they getting out of this lesson? And why is it important? And why does it matter? And why? Why? Right. Why am I doing what I'm doing? And that I think is really important, and it's something that you can get the content, and you can get everything that you've learned so far in UNC Asheville, but that process of self-reflection I think is really important.
There's also a focus on language use and function in edTPA that I thought was really useful. My classroom has more non-native English speakers than native English speakers in it. So thinking about language and how it's used, how I use it in my instruction, how the materials that I get use it, and then how to convey that to students who aren't very familiar with this language. And that's another thing that edTPA will make you reflect on is what am I trying to teach? What am I trying to say? And then how can I get there most effectively for my students?
In an engaged way.
Yes.
And because
How are they
engagement
using it?
is such a big part. How do you know your kids are engaged? Because once you're I had a moment that I was recording my lessons, and you notice that your kids are already not engaged, and you're and it just it makes you be so aware of everything you do, oh my gosh, these kids are dozing off, so it's it makes you think about everything you do, the edTPA process.
Are you engaging them with your instruction? Can they engage at all with the material, with what you're saying, the language that you're using and stuff too?
To me, it's the difference between if you've had a class with are they all in your class? If you've had a class with Dr. Davis and you're always doing something and you're engaging in what you're doing and then you're learning, versus just a huge lecture where someone is sitting and talking, right? So you become hyper aware of those situations where you're talking too much or the kids aren't doing and it's more about you than them, and then you you flip it, right? You want them to be the ones that are doing it. That language use is really important. You want them to be the ones that are using the academic language, not just you. You want them to be the ones that are doing the learning task, not just you. And again, that applies to everywhere in teaching, not just edTPA. So that's really having that prompt, that cattle prod kind of to poke you in the right direction is helpful.
So I'd like for you each to talk a little bit about how you believe participating in the edTPA process contributed to your belief that you are ready to teach.
I mean, just to repeat everything we've been saying, it does get you in the habit of thinking, am I doing everything that I can? Am I meeting the needs of every single one of these 20 students in my class? And that, well, I don't know, it's just, that has just given me a confidence and like as long as I know I'm doing what I can do, and I've learned where to get these resources from and who to ask if I need help, as long as I know that this is the path that I need to be going down and I'm trying my best, then I'm ready to start teaching and keep learning, you know?
I think kind of like what Holly just said, knowing the resources you can go to, the people you can talk to. For our lessons, we did phoneme segmentation. So we can, well, where do you start? You know, how do you teach a 5-year-old how to segment phoneme? So we found like great resources through our teachers. Like the Florida Center for Reading Research is a great resource to look at. Like they give you games you can play and stuff like that. But just knowing the resources you can go to and knowing that it's okay if you don't know how to approach something and to ask questions just made me feel more confident as a teacher, because I think when you're constantly questioning as if this is the best way to teach my students, then you're doing something right. I think that if you are really questioning how you're teaching, then you're really wanting to teach the whole spectrum of the class. So, and it's hard for kindergarten. It's hard for all grades. It was hard for me because I have some students who are reading on a first grade level, and I have some students who don't even have print concepts. So just being able to read your students and helping, like boosting the kids that need boosted and still boosting your high kids too is really important.
Know to go to the AIG teacher because she knows what you can do that won't make it obvious to the rest of the class that this student is getting something a little different. And same with, we have a Title I reading specialist, and she was help for us also, just knowing who to go to.
Right. And just little things that help your students. edTPA made me think, like Amelia was talking about, classroom management is a huge thing. So I purposely, when I played my games, I sat next to my behavioral problem student, and then I sat next to my students who are my struggling readers. So I was able to give those students more one-on-one contact. So it made me think more, which I feel really confident. I'm really excited to start teaching.
Yeah, I think at the very least, what it gives you is a framework of questions. And maybe at the end of it, you know the answers to all the questions, and maybe at the end of it, you don't. But at the very least, you know what questions to ask. And then if you are proactive about seeking out resources in the school, not knowing the answers to the questions is not a big deal, especially as a first-year teacher. But knowing who to go to ask for answers to questions is a big deal. And so I think that's how it really helped me, is even when I felt, when I didn't feel confident in what I was doing, or if I hit a roadblock in my lesson plans, it gave me the right questions to ask myself and others that helped me continue to be a better teacher. I don't think that I'm ever really going to feel like I'm ready to teach, because I'm always going to feel like there's something else that I can be doing that I'm not quite doing yet. But because edTPA is framed as a system of questions, I at least always know what questions to ask.
edTPA made me really excited to start teaching without having to do edTPA. But in the way that, like, it got me really excited thinking about everything that everyone's saying, how I'm going to teach, how I'm going to reach all my students, and I can't wait. And well, now I'm in a really good position, now that we're done, to do this. I can focus on like all these other lessons, like all these other things I want to do. Like right now I'm doing small groups in my class with my supporting teacher, so I get to like pull kids aside and do like fun remedial lessons with them, and I feel more confident. And yeah, I have that list of questions that Charlie was talking about, and it's just, if once you've completed like the huge bulk of work that edTPA is, you're like, okay, like
I could do anything now.
I feel like I can do another lesson plan and another, and as many as I need to until, I don't know, I die, yeah.
Yeah, for me, I think it's definitely the confidence that come with it. Like when you're teaching, you're like, you got this. Like, I mean, you just like, you walk around like, you know. And yeah.
I mean, you've watched yourself on video. Like watching yourself on video is a crazy experience that at first makes you feel terrible about yourself,
like, oh
and then makes you
gosh.
feel much better about yourself, because then you change the weird little things that you do, and then you're like, wow, I never knew I did those weird things, but now I don't, so now I'm a much better teacher. Yeah, it's, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, I just thought about that.
Yeah, but it's definitely the confidence and just knowing where to go. If you, like, once you are teaching, once you have your own class, like, okay, if my kids are not engaged, if I see that my higher students in my class aren't growing, like what I can do. So it's confidence and also knowing where you need to go once you quickly notice that your kids are not where they're supposed to be.
So you talked about the amount of work it is, you've talked about the semester when you can get feedback and how to respond to that. Talked about the challenges and also the rewards. And so as a final question, I would like to ask, what advice would you like to give to candidates who are beginning the process next semester?
Start the edTPA conversation with your supporting teacher immediately. Like, explore that structure with them, so that they can use their like wealth of experience and knowledge to help you make the best decisions for edTPA for yourself as a young beginning educator, and have that talk right away with your supporting teacher with edTPA. And like, there are lots of times where my teacher would ask a question about edTPA, and I'd be like, I don't know. And then that's something that I should know. And then, so during that practice semester, like, then you can ask Dr. Davis, other people who are much more knowledgeable about the process. You have more time to research the how to do before you have to do.
Yeah, on your own.
Yes, on your own.
And you will be on your own. So it's pretty much like, if your teacher and your professors can help you, your teacher can't really give you any feedback at all. So it's like during your practice, like, take advantage of it. Like, get your feedback from your teacher, get your feedback from your professors, like, because that's how, like, it will help you a lot in the real thing when you're doing it by yourself. I mean, you will have your, like, that's also a big part, is to work together, especially like when you are in a grade level. I was on my own boat.
Yeah, she was in second grade by herself, but like kindergarten had support. We were both in fourth grade, so we could like plan together or bounce ideas off each other, which was really helpful.
Yeah, I would say that's kind of where my biggest advice stems from. I think, especially for teachers, like, once you get to this point, you start to feel pretty confident in yourself and your teaching, and you start to feel like, okay, I'm ready to go in and teach. But then it's really hard to like, put yourself out there and finally, like, show, like, okay, this is exactly my best, and now I'm going to put that out in front of other people that are at the same level that I am, and this amazing former teacher of elementary school students that always has the right answers to everything, and I'm going to put my best out there, and then they're going to tear it apart and point out all the tiny little things that are wrong with it. That's terrifying, but that's like the most productive process that you could possibly go through, is putting your absolute best foot forward, realizing that it's not going to be good enough, and letting other people,
Critical friend.
Critical friends.
Very vulnerable
Critical friends,
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something that this group, I think, warmed up to and did really well by the end. But it's hard to warm up to, and the faster you can warm up to that feedback of what your absolute best is, and realizing that you can always make it better, and helping other people make theirs better, and being comfortable with giving and receiving feedback, I think is a really important part of this process, especially in the second semester when Dr. Davis can't help you and your partner teacher can't help you, because it's this official thing that you have to submit to the gods in the sky that will determine if you're a good teacher. But your co-workers, I guess we can call ourselves now, our critical friends, our peers, our comrades, can help you. So I think that's really important.
I just want to reiterate what Amelia said about talking to your cooperating teacher and being on the same page, because first semester was really rough for me, because I walked in ready to record myself with my small group of students, like ready to do this practice run, and she didn't even know I was teaching. I thought you told me this was when I was going to teach, and I showed up. I didn't realize there had to be more conversation. So it can be awkward to like you feel like you're almost taking over your teacher's classroom, and sometimes they have a hard time letting go of that control, especially I'm sure with upper grades when they have EOGs and stuff like that would be hard for a teacher. But my teacher, I know in particular, once she got more confident in my abilities and more comfortable, she let me do more. Like, she watched my first edTPA
Oh, cool.
yeah, and she talked to me about it. So I don't know, she was really, by the end of it, she was really great. But if you can just like kind of break the awkward barrier, like by the end of this, it will be a lot easier for you, because all the teachers that we worked with are national board certified, and basically what we're doing is a mini national board. So they have a lot of good tips, and they have those great resources that you can go to online to argue why you're doing what you're doing. And sometimes they'll even give you ideas that you can't have the second time around.
It's important to remember that, like, as passionate as you feel about teaching, that's how they feel about it too. So you are coming in on their family, their kids, their job, their passion. It's not just a job. I mean, you know that with teaching. And so establishing, not even just having that talk about like, this is edTPA, this is what I have to do, but like establishing a rapport and a good relationship with your teacher, proving, yourself. You have to do that. You're gonna have to prove yourself, because they love this. It's their calling. They love this job, this teaching, just as much as you do. And you'll have to work with them. Also, life will happen along with edTPA, and not just to you, but to your students and your supporting teacher and everyone. So having that flexibility, having that good relationship established when life does happen is really important. For your education, for completing edTPA, for everything.
And I want to just, again, reiterate the friend component. When you have a question, don't just guess. Ask the people who are in the class with you. Because it was really nice to have 2 others in kindergarten with me that I could go to, and we could figure it out together, because kindergarten is a lot different than 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. But it was also nice to have those people in the upper grades who could say, well, this is how it looks in this age. Like, this is how analyzing looks in 4th grade. What is analyzing? Like, what's the very basic component of that? Because that's how it's working with kindergartners. So it was good to have the different viewpoints. So make sure you're taking advantage of that. And even though you won't see each other as often the second semester when you're on your own, still like say, hey, by this day, can we exchange ideas on this? I'm gonna do as much of this as I can, but I'll have questions.
Yeah, and it's nice when you're like sick of staring at it for like 8 hours, and then someone else can stare at it for you for a little bit. It's really nice.
And that transition that Holly was talking about of how this applies in kindergarten and then how that translates into what it turns into in 4th grade is not a conversation that goes away. And so it's really productive to start having that conversation now when you have these people that are going through the same process with you. Because like our school has all staff meetings where they literally sit down and they say, how does this standard transfer from 1st grade to 2nd to 3rd to 4th? And it's, you know, it's important to think about that when you have a wide range of learners in your classroom. And even if your entire classroom was full of the same exact learner, it's important to understand where they're coming from and where they're going.
Well, I'm sure we've all had a teacher too. It's like, you learned this in 2nd grade or whatever,
Right,
you know,
yeah.
to you and stuff. Yeah, but because it builds you, it builds. That's what learning is. It's a process. It builds continuously. So understanding that process informs you as an educator, and it will inform you on how to do your edTPA too.
So once again, I'd like to thank you for sharing your experience, your words of wisdom. I think I speak for everybody in this room that what you shared this afternoon has been extremely valuable. Thank you.
Thank you.